Welcome, lady and or gentleman, to the Spooky Chris podcast. I am the aforementioned Spooky Chris. This is my occasional podcast. Today, oh gosh, this is episode 23. Look at me go. So this time, I'd said I'd be back like sooner than later, and I had another topic on mind, but it occurred to me I would cheat a little and go off the proverbial script. So yesterday it occurred to me, you see things on the social networks, as it were, and it rings, something kind of rings a bell. That's always how kind of I work anyways as a writer, is just random things kind of stick in my head and end up kind of, fuel for stories or whatever. And yesterday it occurred to me, with so much emphasis and so much, everybody's looking for the next Game of Thrones, the next Star Wars, the next big, franchise or whatever. And with Hollywood always looking for the next big thing and the next adaptable item, it occurred to me, you know what? Maybe I need to pitch some of my stuff. And no one's ever going to pick anything up. Like I posted on the Twitter. And I will totally actually pitch this at some point, but my MEEP SHEEP stuff, and that seems like the easiest and most obvious pitch. Which, I guess I was going to do Cemetery Earth today, but I think once in a while. So the idea behind this is once in a while I'm going to pitch you, because the whole thing of this, the writing thing, I have 18 books out. 19, I don't know. It's 18-ish, 19. I forget. There's a point where it's like I have two in the can that aren't officially released yet. So I'm kind of like, where am I at? But I have a whole bunch of books out, and I always hope someone's gonna like what they hear and pick it up. Well, that's a big leap of faith that you, the listener, one, that you found me in the first place, and that two, that you're gonna make the extra step to go and look my stuff up. Which would mean you'd have to go to spookychris.com, my website. But so I figured I would start once in a while pitching my stuff. And I guess, maybe the most obvious one is the one I'll start with, and the one I pitched yesterday, if I can pitch it a little better. So with the interest of late in fantasy epics and series, it occurred to me, many years ago, I started what became a trilogy. I was inspired by friends. I had weird little ideas of funny little creatures that I thought would be fun, and I thought it all kind of worked together, and it became a book of short stories that I put out. And then, I jumped on Tumblr for a while, and when I jumped on Tumblr, my idea was like, oh, cool, I'm going to tell other side stories of this world. The Kingdom of Man, and I was going to tell those stories, and that's how it started. And I wrote the first few of stories I did, and those, I decided, well, what if I put those in a book, and that became the Creep Sheep, which was a collection of side stories, and then a sequel story to the MEEP Sheep. And then I finally kind of realized I had one more story to really tell in that universe, and that became the final book, The Last Sheep. So the premise of the books, and I guess we'll call them the MEEP SHEEP trilogy. It's the MEEP Sheep, the Creep Sheep, and the Last Sheep. So the idea is that in this kingdom there have always been mistresses of magic, and they are the queens of this one realm. It's a big world. They're the queens of this one realm. And they take it onto themselves to kind of look after the kingdom, to keep evildoers away, to protect the kingdom, and it's kind of an overcast, cloudy world, and they kind of endeavor to keep a little sunshine and happiness in that world. Well, it happens that it is the end of one queen's reign, and it is the dawning of the next queen's reign. And the next, the princess, she is to take over, but she has no interest in the crown. She is an artist, and she wants to pursue art. She doesn't want to be a leader. She doesn't want to be a queen. She doesn't want to sacrifice all the things you have to sacrifice to do that. And the idea of sacrificing the thing she loves, art, to do that is something she's afraid of. And part of it is wrapped up into the loss of her mother. Once the queen steps down, she retreats to the motherwood, which is where all queens of old go. It's kind of like where it's kind of an undeath, but it's where they go. They kind of just are gone. And so the first book is about the princess Messi coming to terms with who she is and what she wants and what she wants to do. And all while this is happening, there is a dark cloud forming, and in the form of a witch, and she wants nothing more than to bring destruction and darkness to everything. She has opposed the crown since the very beginning of time, and she wants to destroy all things, of that realm. And in the course of things, so and you kind of get to know the characters and this and that, and the name of the book, The MEEP Sheep, comes from the idea that the young princess, she realizes that her magic is she can create things through her art. So one day she creates something called a MEEP sheep, which is a sheep that is the size of a big like a Maine Coon cat, but like the size of a big cat, that flies around, and basically if you are sad, it can sense that, and it will seek you out, and if you squeeze it, like it's kind of a euphoric, kind of gives you a happy feeling, takes your blues away. And so that's what the MEEP Sheeps are. In the sequel book, The Creep Sheep, there is kind of an antithesis of them that are created by the witch, or by her powers, called the Creep Sheeps. And if you squeeze a Creep Sheep, you die naturally. So with the trilogy, you have the first book, which is setting things up and talking about this dawn of a new era. The second book is about the kind of history of that world, stories of it, the stories of kind of how some things came to be. And then the last book is a war story about a great war that is looming, where all of the dark forces are coming together for kind of one last attack, as the reigning queen decides it's time to step aside. So there's a monstrous gap between the first, second, and third books. It kind of tells of an era. But I always thought that those books deserved to be discovered. They're fun, all ages books. They're weird. I have war pandas in it. These are giant-sized pandas that have, they speak, and they are, they are protectors, and they are, they're war pandas. So they are kind of a culture that has known war. I created something called Blue Moose, which are these floating cows. Bumble Kitties I loved. Bumble Kitties came before the MEEP Sheeps. Bumble Kitties are, smaller than usual cats, like just a little bigger than a kitten, but with bumblebee wings, and they buzz around, and if they all purr together, they create a song. So they're musical. I have some, friends in the books as kind of inspirations to characters and as characters. One of my friends I lost recently is in there as a big character, because he was there when I first started putting this world together kind of verbally. And I just have always felt that those books deserved more. They're fun, like it's a fun book, and they get more serious as they go along. They're dark fairy tales. And The Last Sheep is definitely the darkest of the three. It's the biggest and it's the darkest because it's a war story. And I don't go too, because to me, I always keep in mind kind of you always write for yourself, but I always keep in mind who I'm writing for. And the people, the you in this, the person I'm writing for, I'm not trying to write a gruesome, nasty war story. I'm trying to tell a dark story about the consequence of war and the coming of war, and how all of this has consequence. And I mean, it's a story about family too. The whole trilogy is about family and love and hope at its core. And the last book really does encapsulate that too. Like there's much change, there's much loss, but there's a lot about family and love and what it means to be part of a family and what it means to kind of honor or reject your familial history. And I think they're fun books. I think of all the stuff I've done, I always figured those would be kind of the big breakthrough I'd have. And I've always, I can see all of that in my head, as much as you can ever see this stuff. Like I can visualize it, and I just think I'd love to have seen it adapted somehow. It was never meant to be, but it's just, I think it would have been really fun to see that. And I think it just has a lot to offer. So there's my pitch, friend. My short little pitch. I wrote the books, so I think all my books are pretty cool. But I think for people into kind of fairy tales and fantasies and are looking for a series, I think that you could give the MEEP Sheep books a try. I think they're pretty neat. I think they're a little, everybody says that. I think they're a little different than what's out there and what people kind of usually do with this stuff. As much as you ever get different, I mean, there's a point where everything's a little the same. But I think these are different than the norm. They're led by a young woman, and the whole series is led by women, and I think that's pretty neat because, again, that's for a long time you didn't see that. I kind of dig that. That's how that went down. So there's my little pitch. You can find, like I always said, you can find all my blogs, all my past podcasts, all of my links to my books on spookychris.com. You can find my books on amazon.com. Pretty easy to check out. And once in a while I'll do this. I'll do my little pitches for stuff for my books. Being someone who has always loved movies, I mean, there's an aspect of my stuff that in my head, it always seems cinematic, but I don't know that I write that way. But I mean, I also, having written a couple scripts, I also know that anything can be, it's how you see it in your head anyways. So there's my pitch. Hopefully, like I say, if you're interested in something new, you'll check out my MEEP Sheep books. If this was just a silly little podcast and you kind of rolled your eyes at it, I apologize. I'll get back to the weird stuff sooner than later. And like I said, I want to talk about Scary Stories Tell in the Dark, the movie, and just that notion of storytelling. And I think that deserves more than just a couple of minutes, and I don't want to make this a long, long podcast. So I'll get to that next time. But until then, take care, friend. Keep reading.